All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to our second Thrive in 30 Executive Functioning webinar, Motivation Building and Beating Procrastination. Thank you so much for joining us. The disembodied voice you're hearing is that of me, Chelsea, with the marketing team at Private Prep. We're going to be recording this webinar starting now. So if you have any questions, please make sure to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to address your questions as they come up. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce our incredible executive functioning team, starting with Jenna, Melanie, and Brooke. I'm going to let Jenna take it away and introduce the rest of the team.
All right, it's funny. I'm going to actually punt really quickly. The whole team is here. We are the executive functioning coaches, but Melanie is actually going to lead the webinar this evening. And Brooke and I will chime in periodically with additional ideas or styles to add, just so you get a flavor of the different ways we can approach this. But without further ado, Melanie.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Melanie Barovic. I am one of the executive functioning coaches here at Private Prep. Like Jenna said, or Jenna mentioned, Brooke and her might chime in at some point to add any ideas. Please feel free to do so. Tonight we're going to be talking about how to motivate your child. And just before we really get into that, I just kind of want to talk about my background for just a second. I have a master's in social work. Most of my career involves a lot of counseling. I ended up joining Private Prep. My passion is really with kids and with students, and I love building them up, and I love motivating them, and I love building their self-esteem, and I'm excited to be a part of this webinar. So we will get started. We're gonna first really talk about bribing versus rewarding. There is a difference here, right? Talks about bribes exist to manipulate immediate outcomes, where rewards really create the more long-lasting, repeated positive behavior that we're looking for. I'm sure I'm not the only one. A lot of times I experience maybe telling someone, if you can just do X, Y, and Z, then you can have A and B, right? That is really considered a bribe, because you're manipulating, or when I do it, I'm really manipulating the immediate outcome that I'm looking for. But after X, Y, and Z is done and the bribe is given, the motivation goes right back down because it doesn't create a long-lasting change. Bribes really help with an instant, where rewards really help more with the repeated positive behavior, ultimately leading to self-efficacy within our students, which really just means that they build this belief that they can accomplish what they are set up to do. Again, with bribes, it's a lot more about avoiding the negative behavior, maybe like they're trying to, avoid the procrastination, avoid the distractions with a very immediate response, where rewards can look more like small rewards in the moment leading up to something bigger. I hope that makes sense. Jenna, did you want to add anything, or do you feel like that's...
No, I think I like the distinction here between bribes and rewards, because as we're going to talk about later in the webinar, rewards can be an incredibly important way to build motivation for tasks that require a great deal of effort on the behalf of our children, or that are just not pleasant for them to do. And if they're done thoughtfully, they can build a positive psychology and positive habits, whereas bribes that are sort of our desperate attempt to make something bad stop right then and there tend to not be helpful in that same long-term way.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Going on, this is going to tie in more with the main idea as we keep going. I kind of want to get into the idea of the relationship between motivation and procrastination, and we will bring rewarding into this overall process. If you look on our left, There's the little boy. He is not enthused with having his homework. As you can see, there's nothing written on his paper. He's looking a little bit bummed out that he has to sit there and probably do a task that is very invaluable compared to something else, like hanging out with friends or screen time, something else that can be valuable to him. This plays a lot in the relationship of procrastination versus motivation, because when our students find something to be very invaluable, they're not going to want to do that. They're going to lead more towards something valuable, right? So, and as you can imagine, especially with this schools going remote, right? There's not like schools going remote and kids having to do school from home. You can imagine maybe the distractions and them wanting to go hang out with friends, maybe not really wanting to do school. It's my understanding that school is a little bit less time now, that it's going to be remote. It might not be a full 8-hour day, right? It's just not, the motivation is really lacking here. We want to make these tasks, specifically academics, more valuable than others that they should be avoiding. But how do we do that? In the beginning of working with a student, in my experience, I always like to come up with an overall vision of what they would look like as their best academic self. So where do you want to be? What is your overall goal? What does that actually look like? What are some of the things that you need to get there? For example, if a student wants to be a photographer, then they're going to have to get into an amazing art school, right? Our job here is to build that motivation for the little tasks, the measurable and attainable and relevant goals to that overall vision. We need to build the motivation for those little tasks that might seem more invaluable in the moment to the student, right? Which then leads to procrastination. It has to, when assignments are broken down into chunks, one step at a time, one assignment at a time, we try to make these tasks relevant to the overall vision to create that motivation to get them done. Reasons why students might be struggling with procrastination: they might have too many things to do, they don't know where to start, maybe there's some fear of failure or fear of judgment there, or maybe they're just really too distracted. Thinking about, their workspace, now that they're not going to be in an actual classroom. Where is the desk located? Are they working at a desk, or are they at the kitchen table where maybe there's a bunch of food or mail on the table? What are the distractions around? Is the phone right there? Are they gonna want to look more at the phone rather than, the task at hand? So the relationship between that, we have to be aware. If we kind of go into talking about the different levels of motivation, there's two levels that I like to stay with, which is internal and external motivation. We like to say that as students build these new habits, the effort required to maintain the external motivators will decrease. But to get into what that means, the external motivators are really something that can have that immediate grab of attention. So if the student, cleans their room every day for a week, they can get a check mark on their chart, ultimately leading to a reward that they might want. Maybe they want to go to the beach. Maybe they want a new game from a store, right? Maybe it's a quick fix that could grab their attention. It could look different for everyone. For example, I know I have my own sort of external motivators. When I have a long week of personal and professional responsibilities, I like to treat myself to my favorite coffee shop when it's open, of course. I like to maybe go for a massage, and I like to maybe go to the beach. Those to me are external rewards. My intrinsic rewards, looking at my personal and professional life and my personal and professional choices, ultimately, they're giving me purpose. The work that I do, I find, has a great meaning to my life. I love helping people. Granted, my background is in social work, so being able to help kids really build upon their self-efficacy and motivation levels, that's the intrinsic reward for me. But engaging in new habits, especially in habits that kids don't have any experience with, they might require some external motivators. I don't want to use the term external motivators as a taboo, poorly looked at term. That they're not such a bad thing, especially in the beginning. But at some point, right, we let them go. And the hope is that we end up letting go of the external motivator because the internal motivation is growing. Another example that I do like to provide is I have a family member actually that is taking a test to become a full paid firefighter. She is a volunteer firefighter, but as of right now, her end goal, her overall vision of her best professional self is to be paid full time. She's very capable of all of the tasks it takes to become a firefighter, but she struggles immensely with test anxiety. It's really difficult for her to focus, and she's oftentimes fidgety and disorganized, and she would admit that. It's not just me saying that. So that being said, studying really comes to her as a struggle. Her external motivator there is the grade, right? She's trying to stay away from feeling like she failed. She wants to pass. She wants to, of course, earn money as a full-time paid firefighter. But the internal motivation leads more towards the autonomy, being a dependable member of the family, giving meaning in her career, and feeling proud of herself in the long run. Studying is a hassle, so afterwards, her external reward is watching her favorite television show before she goes to bed. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but over time, as she builds the self-efficacy and she realizes that she is more than capable of doing this, she might not need the television show every time after she studies. The hope is that her internal motivation grows and she's able to do it on her own in autonomy. And that's really the goal of executive functioning as well, right? Learning the formula that works well for the student, because the formula can look different for every student. And following that and seeing what works and carrying that out autonomously. As I keep continuing with my own positive habits, ultimately, I do feel the reward on the inside because of my accomplishment, right? So eventually, and I think that I mentioned this, eventually we do remove those external motivators, and we're gonna move on to the next slide, which really talks about a motivation equation that was coined by this guy named Alex Vermeer. He is a professional researcher. And he's talking about, I'm gonna break this down, but if we look at it, it's talking about we want to increase the expectancy of success and also of the reward. And we want to increase the value of a task. At the same time, we want to decrease impulsiveness, which often comes from distractions. And we also want to decrease the delay of the reward. So in breaking this down, increasing the expectancy of success really means how much you expect to succeed and expect to get the reward. We want to make sure that the reward fits in to the daily schedule or whatever that schedule looks like when the reward comes. And we want this to be counted on. We want to stay away from the fear of failure because we're really, like Jenna said in the beginning, talking about positive psychology, right? We don't want to label we don't want to stick with the fear of failure, although that might be somebody's extrinsic motivation. But it's really that increase, like really building upon that self-esteem and self-efficacy that this is going to get done and I'm going to get the reward of my choice and I'm going to enjoy it, which then leads to the value of the task, how much you'll actually enjoy doing a task and enjoy the reward. It's super important to have a concrete agreed upon reward system here. In increasing the value of the reward and being excited for that, that ultimately makes the task a little bit less grueling because you know that something positive is going to come from it. And it's also super important to, when a task seems grueling and a child or a student maybe wants to stay away from even starting because it's way too overwhelming, if we have that vision at the forefront, and we're able to tie the simple task in, even if it's just a simple homework assignment with where they want to be in the future, it becomes that much more compelling to complete it. We also want to get rid of distractions. I mentioned this before. What does your workspace look like? Does your phone maybe have to be on airplane mode? Do you need to turn the phone off? Does it just need to be in a different room? Sometimes we talk about taking small breaks to be able to stay on task in order to refrain from being overwhelmed. And also asking yourself, is your schedule organized to be able to stay on task? A lot of times students, especially with doing school from home, it's much more difficult to navigate, right? So we want to make sure that our planners and our calendars, if those are being used, and our workspace is organized and with less distractions. We also want to we want to decrease the delay of the reward. The further away that we move our reward, the less likely that the further away we move the reward, the less likely we're going to want to start the task. We're less motivated at that point. We should create deadlines. We should maintain focus, and we should have a specific expectancy of when we can get the reward that we're talking about. We also, I'm sorry, had a glitch in my computer. So
I'm going to jump in while Melanie's working.
Yeah, sorry, I totally lost.
No, totally fine. Just to sort of make sure it's clear at this point that the reward that Melanie's talking about, right, can either be that extrinsic reward if we have a task that the student's not psyched about, or it can just be that intrinsic reward, right? It can be the feeling good about yourself, right? If you're going to feel good and feel less stress as soon as you finish this assignment, then that's a not delayed reward, right? But if the reward is for the student, I'm going to feel like I got the grade I want at the end of this quarter, that might feel so far away that we need to think of something that's real for them in the shorter term.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so my last note on this slide really is, if we find our students or our kids procrastinating, the steps that I would suggest, or we could suggest, are to notice the procrastination, kind of realize that it's there, ask why we're procrastinating. Is it because we're stressed? Is it because there are distractions? Which part of this motivation equation is off? And then at that point, we do something to fix it, right? We ask ourselves how this task is related to the overall goal. We reconnect with our reward. Maybe if our students are having some negative thought processes, we challenge the rationality of those thoughts. Maybe we just need to do something as simple as close the door and open a window and turn an extra light on. It's changing something so that we can stick with this motivation equation. That is all I really want to say about that one. So now it's time to get motivated to motivate, right? So how do we do it? We have to keep in mind that there may not be a one-size-fits-all approach. As parents, our motivation may differ from our child's. What I've found in strategy sessions is maybe a parent will say, I think that my son or daughter needs to work on organization and note-taking strategies. And then I meet with the student and they say, well, my organization is fine. We might see a messy desk and think there's no way that my student can find anything there. But if we ask them to find a pencil, a pen, and a notebook, and they can get it to us in a very efficient amount of time, it might work for them. We need to come to a conclusion as to what we're going to be working on, and then we need to collaborate as a team to work on that and motivate them. To offer some suggestions in building a motivational toolbox, there are some listed here, and I will go into them. The first one is growth mindset. This was a term really coined by a woman named Carol Dweck. She talks a lot about the power of not yet. So instead of looking at a grade as maybe something that doesn't meet our expectations or what we have hoped for, it's not necessarily looking at the grade itself and labeling it. It's just saying, okay, well, maybe I just not yet, right? Maybe we need to try various strategies. Maybe, maybe I need to try studying an extra week, just trying different things. And ultimately, we we come to affirm the efforts that our students are making in realizing that this stuff does not happen overnight. Carol Dweck really describes growth mindset as progress happens over time. We affirm our child's efforts and struggles, and we take on obstacles as more challenges and really an opportunity to develop mastery. Going on to trying various strategies, some students learn better in a visual way, and some students learn better listening to something verbally. Some students have great memory, and some students need to record a lecture and listen back to it a couple times. But it's whatever works for the student. One is not better for the other. This is what I'm saying when we have to try to find the correct formula for each student. Encouraging asking for help. Sometimes I find that students get nervous to raise their hand or ask a question. They don't really want to seem like they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they're a little timid or nervous. I encourage you guys to let your students know asking for help is a sign of courage, and it's a sign of self-advocacy, which is a strength that will bring them so far, not just in school, but in career life as well. My favorite part of the motivational toolbox has to be to understand your child's buy-in. This really just means to allow your child to choose some rewards within reason. This really grabs their attention, and it really gets them to be engaged. A simple example could be, let's study these days and then I'll take you out for ice cream, right? Let's say that's my reward to my student. But what if my student isn't really in the mood for ice cream, and maybe they want to get I don't know, some other dinner instead. If I don't ask them what they're interested in, I'm not going to get them to engage in the process and become motivated to complete tasks, because there's still this hierarchical struggle, right? We want to be a team with our students. We want to get their attention. We want their engagement, and it makes them feel involved, and their autonomy ultimately increases. It creates a partnership. It helps them to feel empowered, and I'm all about that. And ultimately, it builds their motivation intrinsically, I would say, as well, because despite maybe they're picking their external reward, at the end of the day, they're going to feel very proud of themselves, and they're going to be excited that they got this done because they were a part of the process, not because somebody told them to. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that, but we're good. Okay, so now it is your turn. What questions do you guys have, if any?
While you're waiting for a question, I just want to add to everything that Melanie just said in terms of motivation, all those strategies. Think of something, or talk to your student also, or your child, about something they are motivated about, and go through all those things that Melanie just talked about, and figure out, what motivates them for those other things like sports or instruments or even video games. And think about how they can compare that a little bit to academics, because sometimes they don't even realize that they're doing things that they're doing, and they can easily be like, oh yeah, I did do that, or I did try that, or I used this strategy to get to those other places that they are more intrinsically motivated already. So sometimes just making that quick little comparison for them just kind of gels it together a little bit.
We've got a question there. Mel, can you see that? It's what if a student doesn't feel like he has a long-term goal or any motivations at all?
My answer to that would be a brainstorming session. Really building upon the students' interests, and then building upon how they can include their interests into a long-term goal. And with that long-term goal, you can build that motivation. That would be my answer, but maybe.
Yeah, I think I would just argue that there's some long-term goal, right? If you ask a student, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And their answer exists, right? If they can say anything about that, And there's something you can grab onto there in terms of what it will take to get there, even if it ends up being kind of not where you would hope they would be right now. There's definitely anyone who's going to hold down a job 10 years from now has to develop certain skills that you can then talk about. Another question, a little more clarity regarding bribe versus reward. Reward examples seem kind of like bribes. I have some. I know Melanie gave a bunch. I'm sure Brooke also has some. Maybe we'll all just give a couple. For instance, I have 2 elementary school age children, and they have a daily checklist of kind of the low value tasks for them that I think are very important that they need to do, and they need to complete that before they get screen time. And so I sort of build screen time in as a reward, even though it's something that otherwise they would sort of like to just have be the beginning of their day. I know there's also kind of a really easy way to do things, and maybe this is also for younger kids, I would say through middle school. Maybe, actually, as I say that, I taught seniors in high school, and I gave them stamp charts, and those kids fought for stamps as seniors in high school. So even the things that feel hokey, often even the big kids are all about it. So having a like caught you doing the right thing jar, I bought a bunch of pom-poms for students, and as we see them doing what we would like to, we drop the pom-poms in the jar, and they can decide what is the external reward when they do that. And the thing that makes that not a bribe is that it's building habits over time, as opposed to the bribe that's like, you do this one time and you get this large something. I think we all use rewards. The example I always give is like, after I clean my house, that evening I have a glass of wine, right? I hate cleaning. It's not a thing I enjoy. And so I tie it to something else that I do enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Brooke, I know you are fabulous with the positive reinforcement. I'm putting you on the spot. Okay.
Thank you. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to think of things that you guys didn't say, but I love all the things that you're saying. One thing, Jenna, that I do a lot of jars, I should say. So one thing I like to do that I think ties into this a lot is a goal jar for kids to have. So maybe it's these small little goals, like Melanie was talking about before, breaking things up. So saying it's not that you just, finish your whole long project. It's that, maybe today you actually, spent an hour researching like you felt like you were going to. Put that little goal in a jar and continue those little, like almost like pat on the back goals that the students can have for themselves. And it makes them feel good. It kind of starts to add up. And the other thing I like to do is have the kids look back on them when they are feeling a little less motivated. And then they remember, oh yeah, the other day, even when I wasn't kind of ready for it, I, did so-and-so. So to looking back on their small little goals, and then those add up some more. And then they become a little more intrinsically motivated as well. Can also do that almost like a gratitude jar also for themselves. And again, all these intrinsically motivated things they do for themselves start to add up and they start to feel a little bit better. Just one more little thing on that, and I'm kind of even jumping ahead a little bit to the 5-year-old one question. We'll get to that. But what Jenna was saying.
Just say the 5-year-old question because not everyone knows it.
Oh, okay, I forget. I won't even go there. I'm just thinking that it relates. But what Jenna just said, when she doesn't love to clean, and she does, and then she has a glass of wine. For our students, sometimes I think that rewards are also a little bit more, I link them to what they're related to. So not just that you, completed something and then you got ice cream, but maybe something that has a little bit more relevance to one another. So, meaning that like if somebody has lots of like 2 hours to spare and all they want to do is screen time or video games, it's like, that hour they're working, then they get, maybe the hour of screen time, kind of the comparison of that, what else you can be doing at the same time, or something that links together. Just so they see the complement of it all. That's not completely unrelated. Like, oh, you did good, so you get ice cream, which is fine also sometimes, but it makes it less of a bribe and more reward that you get this something like for that and in place of it. Does that make sense? the relationship together of what they're doing that complements it a little bit more so than just something completely unrelated.
Thanks, Brooke. Okay, so it looks like we've got one more question, and we are kind of over time here, so we'll try and answer it quickly. Keep this a Thrive in 30, a true Thrive in 30. And I'm going to let someone jump in and take care of this last question here.
Melanie, it's all you.
Oh, how do you suggest one gets a 5-year-old motivated and focused, especially as he will be starting kindergarten at home with remote learning without ending up bribing him?
I can jump in on this. We don't work a lot with really young kids as a team, but I have a 4-year-old who's starting pre-K remote learning, which I feel like is a similar situation. So this is a thing I've been thinking a lot about. And I've actually started already with him beginning to build routines. I wish I had it here, it's upstairs. I have a laminated checklist with writing and images next to it, just of things for him to do that I think are positive, that could very easily be his school tasks. And he's actually just very excited about checking things off. Also, and I don't know your work situation, when kids are that young, they still love to be with us, which is lovely. And if you're able to do any of it with him, that feels very special, and definitely reinforces the being focused. I also think, what does a focused 5-year-old look like? I think we have to kind of temper our expectation there, because the reality is their ability to focus has not yet fully developed, or really barely begun to develop. And so it just looks like engaging in exploring. And if they're exploring anything, they're learning, and sort of just having that in mind also. 5-year-olds are super excited about getting to know the world. And if when you see them doing that in a way that you're excited about, you let them know, that's going to be incredibly motivating.
I think that's an awesome point to end on. Unless anybody has anything else to add, I think we will wrap this one up. Thank you so much, you guys. Thanks for joining us.
You.
Thanks, EF team. And don't forget, we have another Private Prep Thrive in 30 Executive Functioning webinar next week. Jenna, remind me what next week is on. It's kind of, I've lost it.
It's a wonderful question.
Oh my gosh.
I don't have them memorized in order. I just know all the things.
It's physical workspace.
So creating a workspace that really works. So definitely join us. We will be sending out this information in an email after, I think probably tomorrow morning. So you'll get some of the stuff we talked about tonight, as well as information about the next webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.